but so where my research comes in is I was interested in creativity and how leaders of creative ventures influence creativity. And there's a lot of research on creativity that says that really the loving approach is better. It's that let's leave creative people alone. The research says essentially give them a lot of time, let them experiment and fail, encourage them, don't criticize their ideas prematurely, create psychological safety, right? I mean, we know that when people, if you hound people up and yell at them, they're not going to be creative. Their attention is going to narrow down, and so organizations that are really like sort of like very authoritarian are probably not going to be as creative. And so an example of Google is an example of a company, or Hewlett Packard's when they were still in their heydays, they required people to spend 20% of their time on their own pet projects, right? Doesn't
That's
happen.
how Gmail was created.
Right. So I was interested in that, and then I happened onto Steve Jobs. I read Steve Jobs' biography, and I observed Elon Musk, and I was like, those guys don't look like loving mothers. They look more like Steve Jobs is kind of an asshole, but also very successful in creating a very creative company, a genius as well, right? And Elon Musk, kind of similar. There's a lot of stories about how stressful the environment is, and so I was curious. I was like, what is that about? How does that work? So I really challenged my own belief, right? I really believed I have a bias in favor of the loving mother, the democratic approach, and I know it works. Google somewhat, is a successful company that has the whole .com culture of like coddling people with free food and lots of perks to make them happy so that they're creative, right? It's sort of predicated on this idea of like that will make them more creative. But I started to question that, and so I wrote an article on it was called the lone genius model of creative leadership versus the loving mother approach. And so similar to those earlier studies, I found there is both styles work. It's going to be different workplaces. It's probably going to attract different kinds of people. They work for different reasons, But really, I think the lone genius model is in fact a model where you have the top leader is the chief creator, and everybody else is working for them to achieve their vision. Whereas the loving mother is like the leader is not the chief creator. It's the person who creates an environment where people can be creative and 1,000 flowers can bloom. And both work. They're just different types of models. I mean, if you want to extend that, really, like even though America and France and democracies, we've created a model that we think is the best, right? You have an alternative like China, which is a autocratic regime, and you have to admit that they're pretty successful in terms of in economic terms with an autocratic approach. So anyway, so it's another kind of similar kind of reflection on like questioning a little bit I question my own bias, my own assumptions, and I still like the democratic approach better, but I have to admit that the alternative works.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I even just heading into this conversation, I probably would have trended towards saying that I thought that loving mother style was probably the better of the two.
Mm-hmm.
But I think after listening to you, it really comes down to self-awareness. You have to be able to reflect on who you are as a person and the impact you want to have on your organization and what the circumstances in front of you are, and you have to know what kind of leader you're being demanded to be by your company. I think that's an interesting take that I hadn't really thought of before.
Yeah. And people have different personalities, right? Just naturally.
Yeah.
And so thinking about like personality traits, like people who are higher in orderliness will fit better under that lone genius, but people who are maybe have more openness or agreeableness, some extroversion, they'll fit much better in that loving mother model.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And also in my own reflection on myself, I realized I don't like the hyper competitive, hyper masculine sort of environments, but some people love it and thrive in it.
Yeah.
Like some people wouldn't have found the Morgan Stanley experience horrible. They might have been like, yeah, hell yeah, I'm energized by that competition. You know? So then, I think it's important also to realize who are you as a person, as a personality, and what's a culture that fits you.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's okay to have different strokes for different folks.